Hey, fellow pastors, McKay Caston here, and I want to invite you to build your next sermon using the Bible's own sermon outline. Now, I know you're thinking, wait a minute, I had no idea the Bible had its own sermon outline. Well, now you do. In fact, I bet you already know it because we learned in biblical theology class that Scripture has a meta-narrative that flows from Genesis to Revelation. It's a four-part gospel story: creation, fall, redemption, and restoration. Now, my discovery of this framework for homiletics was triggered by an illustration from Brian Chappell's book, Christ-Centered Preaching, where he compares preaching to explaining an acorn, because you can describe an acorn in detail, its shell, its texture, and its seed all day. But unless you relate that acorn back to the massive oak from which it fell and into which it will grow, you really haven't truly explained the acorn. And the same is true for preaching. We can say a lot about a text, its genre, its grammar, its historical context, its cultural background, but unless we tie it to the redemptive thread of the overarching narrative, we haven't faithfully preached the text. If the overarching meta-narrative is like the oak tree, then every individual text, topic, and theme is an acorn. And the mind-blowing reality is that every acorn shares the exact same DNA as the tree. This means that every text shares the exact four strands of biblical DNA: creation, fall, redemption, and restoration. This fourfold story now serves as not only a hermeneutical grid to understand the text, but also as a homiletical framework by which we're able to structure our sermons. And while biblical theology uses the terms creation, fall, redemption, and restoration, we translate them for the pulpit as principle, problem, gospel, and response, or PPGR. Using this fourfold framework not only gives you extraordinary expository focus and homiletical clarity, but it also dramatically cuts your prep time because your sermons are essentially already outlined for you. Rather than inventing a new outline from scratch every week, you simply unfold the text according to its own redemptive framework. When you start using this fourfold PPGR framework as your week-to-week methodology, there are some practical things that are going to happen that are going to profoundly influence your preaching ministry. Number one is that rather than having to cut a new trail every week through the text into a sermon, you'll follow a zero-guesswork, pre-paved path from exegesis to manuscript. And rather than live under the mental stress of an unfinished sermon, you'll go from exegesis to manuscript by lunch on Wednesday. And rather than burning out, you'll finally get time for a real day off and a sustainable ministry. Because Preach 360 is more than a preaching system. It is a pastoral lifeline. You don't have to live buried under the weight of an unfinished message. And you also don't have to sell out to generic AI. Because Preach 360 is a custom AI sermon assistant built entirely on this proprietary sermon framework with curated theological sources. It does not do the work for you like generic AI. It does the work with you. In fact, instead of you prompting it for content, it prompts you for content, guiding you step by step through the sermon blueprint. The result is a message in your words with your voice from your heart. Finally, an AI-assisted sermon studio that you can use with confidence and full pastoral integrity. All you have to do is follow your guide. So if you're ready to trade the stress of the blank page for a proven biblical blueprint, then visit preach360.com and build your first sermon for free. Again, my name is McKay Caston. If you have any questions at all, please reach out. I would love to serve you in any way that I can.